Cool. Welcome everyone to tonight's event, where we are delighted to have with us the Right Honourable Baroness Sayeeda Warsi with us today, who in my eyes is the most politically influential Muslim politician in the UK. We will be discussing her new book, Muslims Don't Matter, that takes a deep dive into what Islamophobia is, how to identify it, and how to challenge it. For those who want to understand anti-Muslim racism, described as Britain's bigotry blind spot, this book is an invaluable resource, a must-read for anyone who genuinely cares about tackling all forms of bigotry. I would thoroughly recommend and encourage every one of you here tonight to make sure you buy a book before you leave tonight, and even get an additional one for a friend or a colleague who could benefit from its findings. We are delighted that Baroness Warsi is able to be with us tonight, and we have a packed session over the next hour. Before we begin, I would like to introduce the teams that I've pulled together tonight. My name is Junaid Ashraf, and I'm one of the co-founders of the Scottish Asian Business Chamber. We're supported by the Glasgow Chamber of Commerce, and we were launched in October 2023 to bridge the gap between minority ethnic-led business, influential organisations, and government. Our communities have been a part of the fabric of Scotland's business ecosystem for generations. We have fully embedded ourselves in all walks of life, from restaurants, takeaways, and retail, to medical practices, legal and accountancy firms. However, further to that, we run tech companies, own clothing brands, have complex engineering companies, own consultancy practices, launch exciting new businesses in the fields of life sciences, artificial intelligence, satellite and microprocessing technology. There isn't a field of work that we are not fully participating in, but also often we are also leading the charge. The Asian Business Chamber has been created to support, showcase, and connect all of this work and more to the wider Scottish business ecosystem. The Asian Business Chamber has three pillars of work that we lead. Firstly, bridging the gap between established business owners to government and government agencies. We have done this through an estimated 60 engagements over the past 12 months, including our Eid event hosted at Denton's with 100 guests and the leader of the Scottish Labour Party. We've also had a roundtable with the Bank of England, and we were actually invited to meet with the new Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rachel Reeves, and also the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, back in August and September. Secondly, we foster an ecosystem for minority ethnic-led startup growth, where we host the ABC Mastermind Group of 20 tech and growth entrepreneurs seeking to grow this group to 50 companies by March 2025. The purpose of the ABC Mastermind Group is to supercharge the social network that they have, solidify their offer, and create sustainable growth for our minority ethnic startup companies. And thirdly, gender equity, where we have built a partnership with the Zen Women's Empowerment Team, who have worked alongside us today to bring together tonight's event. Together, we have launched the Zen Women Spotlight event, and these are a monthly networking event for minority ethnic women of all backgrounds and stages in professional life and business ownership, highlighting the outstanding work led by minority ethnic women in Scotland. This builds into our annual Zen Women's Empowerment Awards hosted in September that is co-hosted by Miss Scotland, showcases the charitable work of the World Care Foundation in Lebanon and Jordan, and is a night of celebration for the evening with 250 women and an award ceremony. I'd like to show you a video of our Empowerment Awards held in September of this year.
Today we're here at the Zain Women Empowerment Awards, which is in collaboration with Asian Business Chamber. Zain was inspired by our sewing centres in Lebanon, and it's basically a self-sustainable project, and it's a women empowerment project to get ladies back on their feet so that they have, with dignity, not just to give them handouts.
Our keynote speaker for the evening, Bina Sharma.
Each and every time we fail, or there is a negative consequence of something that we do, this influences how we see and deal with our next challenge or problem.
So it's great to have been here to motivate and inspire some of those in the audience today, but we're looking just for a little bit of an uplift to begin the event today.
I was humbled, I'll tell you this, reading them, I was close to tears. It was just phenomenal reading some of these nominations. And the winner for Inspirational Entrepreneur is Ashraf. Reading some of these
Inspirational Professional is Dr. Sayeeda Warsi and Dr. Sayeeda Warsi.
She asked me to come.
Thank you. And the winner of the award is Junaid.
Good morning.
So it's not just myself, but there are many other wonderful colleagues that are trying to push this work, trying to ensure that our teachers across the country are able to engage in these conversations, which can be difficult at times, and that's why it's so important to have this work recognised in such a positive way.
Please don't think of it as an environment, think of it as actually helping somebody along the way. Introducing Zain Couture Fashion Show, it's an environment.
Tonight's been great, and I've met so many wonderful people here. So it's more about how do we create more of an inclusive community so we can all come together and celebrate one another.
It's been a fantastic evening, fantastic turnout, great women here, lovely opportunity to network with everyone.
This is a room full of amazing and inspirational women who are doing great things to have such a positive impact on society. This is a room full of
and the winner of the International Inspirational Community Champion is Tabasum Mati.
This is not just my award, it's for every single woman.
Having the tenacity to keep going, and that's the thing that I would give to everybody. Just set your star and keep going.
The Woman of the Year 2024 is Samina Majid. Is she here today?
I'm overwhelmed. I didn't expect it. The whole event has just been phenomenal from start to finish with regards to the way they welcome people. It's so empowering to see women show so much support for one another.
The Scottish Asian Business Chamber is very keen on amplifying and uplifting the voices of women, which are often not heard within the business community, but even more so specifically our ethnic minority women.
We wanted to promote those in the community of ethnic minorities that contribute to the community, and I think it's been a successful event. As I said, the turnout has been great, and we will hopefully continue to do more awards in the future, but absolutely thrilled with the turnout.
Just want to say thank you to all of our sponsors and all of the contacts and all our keynote speaker, which was also introduced by Asian Business Chamber, Bina Sharman. And we're really, really happy to have her on board. So hopefully we'll be able to progress with the Zain Women Empowerment Awards every year and do it a yearly thing.
It's been an exciting year, and we're thrilled of the growth of the Scottish Asian Business Chamber over the past year, supported by the Glasgow Chamber of Commerce. And we're excited for what 2025 holds for us with our partnership with the Zen Women's Empowerment team. And I want to thank the University of Glasgow for their support in hosting tonight's event. If you would like to stay in touch with all of our latest events, please follow us on LinkedIn or sign up to our current mailing list on the asianbusinesschamber.scot, and the website's being revamped right now as well. But I would now like to invite Uzma Khan, Vice Principal for Economic Development and Innovation and Deputy Chief Operating Officer of the University of Glasgow, to the stage to begin our event tonight.
Junaid. Okay, so good evening everyone and welcome to the University of Glasgow for what is going to be a very exciting and actually is a sold-out event with Baroness Sayeeda Warsi. So Junaid's already kindly introduced me. I am one of the Vice Principals here at the University. I'm also the Deputy Chief Operating Officer. Beyond that, I also act as the University's Race Equality Champion. I want to thank you all for joining us tonight, particularly because it's midweek and most of you have probably left children at home to fend for themselves. But we're delighted to see an incredible turnout here, which reflects, I think, the high regard in which we hold Baroness Sayeeda Warsi and the outstanding work of the Scottish Asian Business Chamber. They really do work relentlessly to raise the profile of minority ethnic businesses and also to inspire and connect our communities. So I do want to thank Junaid and his colleagues for organising tonight's event. You know, when he first came, if you know them, they're a very persuasive bunch. And when he came with his ask for us to host this event, we really just couldn't refuse when we heard who it was and what it was for. So I want to say a little bit about the university because I think we share the same spirit and ethos of the Asian Business Chamber in supporting and creating mechanisms to drive more inclusive representation across all aspects of our work and in our contribution to society. It's why we also proudly host the John Smith Centre here, whose mission is really centred around empowering new and diverse voices, particularly those from working class and minority ethnic backgrounds, to engage with and enter UK politics. At the university, we're also deeply committed to fostering opportunity, inclusion and a genuine sense of belonging for our students and staff. We know that words alone cannot be enough to combat racism and religious hatred. Action is essential. That's why we have made tackling racism and addressing structural inequalities within our own institution a central part of our own mission. And as a Vice Principal for Economic Development and Innovation, I personally am deeply focused on ensuring that our work extends beyond the university to deliver meaningful impact in the communities that we serve. We need to work collaboratively with businesses such as the Scottish Asian Business Chamber, and which is really essential in an effort to bridge that gap that Junaid talked about between institutions, government, communities and people to drive positive change. I'm also deeply passionate about that. Prior to joining the university in 2020, I spent just over 2 decades for my sins as a civil servant in the Scottish Government. And we know when it comes to policy making, diverse voices, experiences and perspectives play a really critical role in shaping policies that address the real world challenges and serve the needs of our communities around us. And we know that inclusive policy making is not just a matter of fairness, it's really the foundation for creating solutions that work for everyone. However, sadly at times, it does still feel like, despite our best efforts, and you're really appropriating from the title of the book, some voices still don't matter as much, and we need to start really thinking about how we challenge that. Now, I'm going to make a confession. I haven't fully read the book yet, but I will buy my coffee before I leave this evening. I have read extracts of it, and I read them with a mixture of surprise, but also sadness at the commonality of some of the experiences that you talked about. What really hit home to me, I think, was the conversations you talked about that your parents had with you and your siblings when they insisted on a plan B. So if you don't know what plan B is, really buy this book and take a look. But like the author, I never really fully understood as a child what my parents meant when they said, have a plan B because one day they might chuck us all out. And now I find myself saying that to my children. We have to be aware and we have to be alert. And that's really a really sad state of affairs, I think. I also resonated, I think, when you talked about the guilt and accountability we probably all feel for acts committed by members of the same faith as us, a guilt that many of us have probably carried over many years and decades as we've grown up in this country that we call home. So it really is a privilege to introduce someone whose life and work embody and the principles of inclusion, justice and equality. Now, the Right Honourable Baroness Warsi has exemplified what it means to break barriers and inspire change. As Britain's first Muslim cabinet minister and the first Asian person to chair a major political party, she has not only made a significant contribution to public life, but has also been an incredibly powerful voice in challenging the inequalities and assumptions that are faced by British Muslims, and really shone a light on the issues which are often overlooked in public discourse. As one of 5 girls born to immigrant parents of Pakistani origin, Baroness Warsi studied law at Leeds University before setting up her own legal practice. She's been a racial justice champion and campaigner for many years and was instrumental in the launch of Operation Black Voice. Now, for 6 years, she also supported the Joseph Rowntree Charitable Trust, and in 2002, she founded the Severia Foundation. The foundation itself is a charity that helps empower widows, divorcees, and orphan girls through skills, education, and other poverty relief programs in Pakistan. It now operates as a purpose-built women's centre in rural Punjab, running programs that have benefited over 30,000 individuals. Now, Baroness Warsi also hosts an award-winning podcast with David Video called A Muslim and a Jew Go There, aimed at challenging racism and prejudice through debate and meaningful discussions. So with that, we're so delighted that you're able to join us tonight at the University of Glasgow, hosted by the Scottish Asian Business Chambers and Zen Women's Empowerment Team to discuss her latest book, Muslims Don't Matter. Please join me in giving the warmest welcome to, and a round of applause to the Right Honourable Baroness Sayeeda Warsi.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Usman, for that incredibly warm welcome. And thank you so much, all of you, for turning out on a cold evening midweek. I'm going to make a few opening remarks and then we're going to start the conversation. I said to Junaid when he was organising this event that the purpose of these gatherings, and I'm having numerous of these gatherings a week, is to have a two-way conversation. To really use the moment that I had earlier this year when I felt that I needed to write about the experiences that so many of us have been going through, and more acutely since the last 12 months, that this is genuinely a moment for us to have an open conversation. Nothing is off the table, and providing that we talk about things in a way which is both civilized and civilizing and in the interests of learning, I genuinely hope that people go away from today having learned. Why did I write this book? Because in February of this year, months into what was going on in the Middle East, listening to the rhetoric of politicians describing both the pro-peace marchers on our streets, but also talking about Muslim communities generally, seeing our slow march towards a general election where the politics of hate was starting to rear its ugly head, where so many of the people around me, family and friends, were starting to talk about plan Bs and exit routes, where conversations were being held about where people were buying alternative homes because things were getting too tough. In the middle of this, I had a conversation with my husband on one of our regular walks in Yorkshire. I said to him, we haven't got a plan B. We haven't bought a sanctuary home elsewhere. And are we going to be the ones in the family who got it wrong? And he said to me at that moment that if you feel that our place in this country, our sense of equal worth and value, our belonging in Britain is over, well, then it's over. And so what you can do, of all people, is to start the fight back. And when I mean the fight back, I don't mean that in a way in which is aggressive or front-footed. I mean in a way which demands of this country that I am of the same equal worth and value as anyone else. That I need to stop going on about how I am so grateful to live in my own country. That I am sick of condemning, I am sick of apologizing, I am sick of justifying. I'm done with being the acceptable, palatable Muslim. I need to explain to you how I feel, how we got here, and how we need to change direction, not just for the sake of British Muslims, but for the sake of our country. That it cannot be right that in 2024, as the granddaughter of two men who served in the British Indian Army, both my maternal and paternal grandfathers served, as the great niece of a great uncle who was taken prisoner of war during the Second World War fighting for this country, as the daughter of a man who, like so many of our forefathers, literally broke their backs working in the mill towns and in the foundries of this country, building it after the Second World War. As somebody who has served her country at the top table as a Privy Councillor, as a member of the House of Lords, and as the mother of a child who is now back in uniform in our armed forces serving our country, I refuse to accept that a country that my family have helped to protect and defend and build would not protect and defend me. And that was why I wrote this book. 12 weeks. 12 weeks. It's amazing, ladies and gentlemen, how anger can focus the mind. Anger underpinned by fear and heartbreak, because this is a heartbreak letter to my nation about how we have ended up here. So my urge to you today is only buy the book if you're going to use it. This is not a dead document. This is a living resource. It explains to you how we got here and what we need to do, to use a phrase for better purpose, make Britain great again. So with that, I'm going to invite Junaid onto here. We're going to start a conversation, and I sincerely hope you're going to be a part of it too.
Oh, thank you so much for opening us up there, Baroness. I've got through the book, and I just want to say I cannot believe the amount of information that's covered in the book. For me, this is a necessary handbook for everyone to understand how insidious and ingrained Islamophobia is across politics, media, health, education, and society as a whole, impacting Muslim communities. So we wanted the conversation tonight to be focused on action. So on that, we have quite a lot of influential people here in the room with us today. So we've got the Deputy Chief Executive of one of the largest chambers of commerce in the UK, the CEO of a FTSE 100 financial services company, the chair of one of the largest health boards in Europe, the director of Islamic Finance Council UK, partners of the world's largest global law firm, senior members of the police, and senior leadership from multiple global universities in this room here with us today. So from your perspective, what lessons can these individuals take from your book, Muslims Don't Matter, to implement in their leadership positions to tackle Islamophobia in Scotland through the influence of their organisations?
Well, a great question, actually, and I know that so many of this audience is an audience from the financial world or the business world. And there's a whole section in the book which I talk about persecution and prejudice and bigotry being bad, but it also being bad for business. There are so many studies now, many of them quoted in the book, including from the World Economic Forum, which shows that those societies which are open, tolerant, inclusive, multicultural, multiracial societies are likely to achieve better growth, better GDP, more entrepreneurship, and likely to have much more vibrant business communities. I spoke about this many, many years ago when I was in government at a speech in Georgetown in 2013 when I talked at the time about the persecution of Christians, tragically, in light of what's going on in the Middle East at the moment, persecution of Christians in lands where Christianity was born. And I talked then how historically those nations that had had multicultural, multiracial societies had done better economically, had moved forward in terms of science, in terms of inventions, that they were at the forefront of what we would now consider to be the new kind of bastion of development, for example, around AI. So the kind of worlds that existed at the time in that space. And so what I say is that of course, I shouldn't have to make the case to say why we should not be treating Muslims to higher standards than we treat any other community, or demanding of them accountability in the way in which we don't demand accountability from other communities as a collective monolithic group, because that is racism. But we also have a self-interest in not doing that. Not only is it the wrong thing to do, it's the wrong thing for us to do for the rest of us as well, because economically we are worse off for it. And again, in the book, I outline how we're not utilising the full talent within the British Muslim community, from everything from the way in which, for example, interviews are done, from the way in which names are put on applications. There was an interesting study which showed that when Muslim women, for example, are interviewed over the telephone, they're likely to get through to the next stage of interview. But when visibly Muslim women turn up for interview, visibly Muslim, for example, because they wear a hijab, they're unlikely to then get through to the next stage of interview. And so there are all sorts of indicators which show that the Muslim community is not being fully utilised, which is bad for Muslim communities, but it's also bad for the nation. So my urge really to leaders is threefold. One, look around you and look at whether you are employing and taking on the full talent that is available in your communities. Secondly, when you take that talent on, if you're sat there patting yourself on the back because you're one of these inclusive liberal organisations and you look around the table and you see people of different colour, maybe even visibly Muslim women around the table, ask yourself, are we a diverse organisation just, or are we a diverse and inclusive organisation? Because having different faces around the table is not enough. You have to have different faces around the table who feel confident enough to be authentic when they're at their table, to be able to use their voice at that table, and for that voice to matter. Because if those second, third, fourth bits don't happen, then literally you're not using the full extent of the talent that you have around the table. And the third thing I would say to these big organisations, especially in light of what's been happening in the Middle East, often large organisations have struggled to find a set of words or a statement in which they've been able to keep everybody happy. It's not your job to keep everybody happy. It's your job to accurately reflect what your workers are feeling. And one of the things that David Badil and I do a lot in our podcast, In a Muslim and a Jew Go There, is we acknowledge that we're not always going to agree, and we think that there's strength in sitting with difference. So if, for example, you look at what's going on in the Middle East, it is quite right for organisations to say, we have spoken to some of our Jewish colleagues or colleagues who have connections and family in Israel who feel A, B and C, and we want them to know that at this difficult time, we are here to support them. And then another statement can go out which says exactly the same. We have listened to our colleagues who are Palestinian or Arab or Muslim or have family and connections in that region who have been affected by what's happened in the Middle East. We fully take on board their concerns, and we want them to know that we are here to support them in their difficult times. You can be supportive to how communities are feeling without having to take sides. So that's the other thing. I think the final thing I would say to you is learn as organisations to sit with difference and to have the confidence to have a diversity of views amongst your workforce without feeling that you have to take sides on some of these difficult issues.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much for that. I'm hearing equity and parity between different sort of communities and to ensure that these organisations are also fulfilling on their purposes with their own workforce. Having read your book, you cover that there's been a policy of disengagement with Muslim-led organisations with the government since about 2007 by both major political parties. November, the month that we're in, is Islamophobia Awareness Month, which is led by MEND, who are in the room with us today. They have led the adoption of the all-party parliamentary group definition of Islamophobia in a third of local councils in Scotland, brought Islamophobia Awareness Month to be a regular fixture in Scotland, and spearheaded engagement with the Scottish Government alongside the Muslim Council of Scotland and the Muslim Council of Britain, led by Zara Mohammed, who's actually a relative of mine, heard you with recently. So, and she's actually referenced in the book too. So I suppose, what lessons can be taken from your book, Muslims Don't Matter, and how the majority of everyday Muslims, like most of the individuals in this room today, can push against Islamophobia in their daily lives?
Zara may be your relative, but she's my hero. She's a phenomenal young woman who has led the Muslim Council of Britain, which in itself is a challenge. She's had to face external challenges and internal challenges, and her resilience and courage kind of once again reminds me, with all due respect to the wonderful men in the room, that the real powerhouse in our communities are its women. I think there are a number of things. First of all, agency. The definition of Islamophobia, we've had a series of different definitions since the 1990s. The Runnymede Trust came up with a definition. Subsequently, there have been bits of academic work. The most widely accepted definition is the All-Party Parliamentary Group on British Muslims definition, which basically says that Islamophobia is a form of racism and it targets expressions of Muslimness and perceived Muslimness. There's been huge controversy within the Conservative Party in Westminster not adopting the definition, although the Conservative Party in Scotland did, and every other political party in Scotland, the SNP, the Labour Party, all adopted the definition. And I find it astonishing that here we are, in light of what happened in the summer and the race riots, that we're still arguing, which were clearly targeted at Muslims and migrants, and they were Islamophobic in their nature, that we're still arguing about what word we can use for our racism. If we cannot even choose our own word to describe our own racism, how disempowering is that? So not only at the moment do we have a lack of agency in defining our racism, in having the word that defines our racism, we don't even have agency in being able to put forward organisations who may seek to represent us. So the 17-year policy of disengagement, which again I outline in this book, where successive governments have basically said that because X, who was connected to Y, said about 15 years ago something that we don't like, therefore we're not speaking to the whole organisation. And I find it astonishing how politicians can do the most appalling things that are expected to be forgiven and we're expected to move on, but yet community organisations 20 years later still do not have any road to rehabilitation or any path to redemption. And that's hypocrisy, because that again goes to the very core of agency, that Muslim communities can't choose who they seek to represent them. And so what I would say is, look, in the end, what is Islamophobia? Islamophobia is a form of racism. People say, well, it can't be racism because it's a religion that people are talking about, not race. Well, that doesn't explain why so many Sikhs get beaten up because they're perceived to be Muslim. That doesn't explain why people who aren't practicing Muslims get beaten up. That doesn't explain why gurdwaras are attacked because they're perceived to be Muslim. Then people say, well, you can't actually be a race because you come in lots of different colours. Which I say, my God, you've clearly not led a single book on racialisation of communities. Just because Jews are black and Jews are brown and Jews are Arab and Jews are white doesn't mean that Jews can't be racialised as a group, and anti-Semitism isn't a form of racism. So I just find it astonishing that the nonsense that we have had around this work continues, and yet we fail to move on to what we should be dealing with, which is the actual real-life consequences of Islamophobia. 3 grandfathers in this country were killed at the hands of Islamophobes simply for being Muslim. 3 grandfathers on our streets were killed in 3 separate incidents by 3 separate men, all because they targeted Muslims. Most people in this country don't remember any of their names. And that's the lack of agency. That's how we do not take this new form of racism seriously. So is it a hard battle for organisations and government and institutions to take Islamophobia seriously? Yes, it is. But then it was so when it came to women. There was a time when this country thought that women were second-class citizens, that we were not good enough to have the vote, that we were not good enough to be allowed to have our own property, that we weren't allowed to work. And then we won that battle. But at the time we were told we were not good enough, politicians were not standing up and saying, by the way, I'm a misogynist and I'm sexist. They gave very intelligent, intellectualized arguments for being misogynists. When gay communities were being persecuted in this country and they were being chemically castrated, politicians didn't stand up and say, oh, by the way, I'm homophobic. They gave very intellectualized academic arguments for why they felt that gay people were inferior. When we were anti-Semitic in this country, nobody stood up and said, oh, by the way, I'm just anti-Jewish and I'm anti-Semitic. They gave very intellectualized arguments about why Jewish people were considered to be inferior. So it shouldn't surprise us that politicians are defending their racism through intellectualized arguments. The battle for equality is never won easily, but it's when it gets difficult, the most difficult, as it did this summer, that we have to double down and say, in my country, I have the right, not for special treatment, for equal treatment. I have the right to have equal worth and equal value to anybody else, irrespective of the religion I was born into, the religion I chose to practice, the religion you associate with me, or the heritage of my parents.
Fantastic. In terms of the specific actions, I think something I'd like to just add to that is that, as I said earlier, I mean, your book goes into very thorough detail in terms of politics, media, healthcare, every single fact. I genuinely do not know. I listened to it on Audible when I realized it was only like 160 pages. I mean, as somebody who was previously involved in politics, you've covered pretty much the entirety of anything I would be able to explain to anybody over the last 20 years or 30 years or so, and the level of access that you have, that you have as a senior sort of political figure. You're speaking to these things in first hand, and I think the specific action I would say to everybody in the room is to get this book and to genuinely actually read it, go through it back to front. I'm actually going to read it again, so I'm going to get the physical copy today, and really mull it over and have those conversations with the people around you. And through reading the book, you will feel more empowered to take on Islamophobia. I mean, I think there's quite a lot in the book that I felt as if when, for example, the period of disengagement over the last 17 years, that's something I would say to people, but then probably not say to people who aren't Muslim, because it feels a little bit almost, what you call it, like a, what's the word I'm looking for? Like as in, like we're just kind of making up, like it's in our own head. But the fact that you're able to quite clearly say that from the political position that you have in seniority gave me the confidence to be able to just say it to people now. Yeah. There's been a period of disengagement.
The reality is, Junaid, that I have privilege. For all the challenges that I raise in this book, I have privilege. I have the privilege of position. I have the privilege of platform. I have the privilege of financial independence. And I have the privilege of being post-50 and not giving a, right? Because there's something that comes with age where you suddenly think, I've lived more than 50% of my life and I'm done. That's why the book starts with, I'm done, right? I'm done with explaining. And that privilege, the privilege of having sat at the table where the decisions were made, simultaneously sitting in the heart of the community where the decisions that were made were impacting those communities, I feel that I have a responsibility to explain how we got here. And I would say to you, and I honestly say this to you, if you're not going to read the book, please don't buy it. I don't know if you know anything about books, but whether we sell one book or 100,000 books makes not a jot of difference to me, or to my, well, it probably makes a difference to my publisher, but it doesn't make a difference to me. This has got to be a book you carry around with you. I mean, even I wrote the book, right? And I still, if you look at the inside of it, right, I spend my whole time writing inside my own book. I want you to write all over this book. I want you to mark it. I want you to put little tabs on it. I want you to use it. Everything from education to healthcare to banking. I mean, look at a very simple example. Muslim communities have been unbanked and debanked for decades. Go speak to charities, individuals whose banks were closed down without any explanation. And we didn't bat an eyelid. And then Nigel Farage, because he didn't have enough money in his Coutts bank account, had his Coutts bank account not shut down, but he was referred to a more suitable bank account for his level of wealth, which he clearly was slighted by. And wow, the whole world suddenly started talking about debanking and unbanking, and how this was such an injustice. And we had an inquiry and heads rolled and people lost their jobs. And so many Muslims were sat there going, whoa, I didn't realize this was an issue. We've been putting up with this for 20 years. But yet Farage mattered, Muslims didn't matter. Going to Hollywood, going to the arts, culture space, look at comedy. Time and time again, the way in which Muslim communities are stereotyped and demonized and stigmatized. There is a whole department in the US intelligence world whose job it is to support those movies who paint the war on terror in a very specific way. The number of attacks on Muslim communities in the US after American Sniper came out was horrendous. And these real-life culture things where effectively generations are brought up on the Muslim being the raghead, the extremist, the terrorist, the misogynist, the guy who's got more, even in comedy, people like Sacha Baron Cohen constantly putting out this vision of Muslims being homophobic, Muslims having multiple wives, Muslims being ignorant, Muslims being dirty, all of this stuff that's put out, this subtle way in which it's done through arts and culture. And there's, again, in here, I quote academic work, PhD level work, which has been done by people, which shows how subtly but deliberately this is done, so that over time there is a cultural picture that is built up, so that from that, the move towards polling, where large sections of Western society start to believe that Muslims are violent, uniquely extreme, uniquely homophobic, uniquely misogynistic, this kind of, and Muslim women are subdued and don't have agency, and all this kind of nonsense that's then put out, that it is quite deliberate. And then it starts to have an impact. So, like I say in the book, it's all right to blame little Johnny in Southport who was throwing bricks at the police because he was being Islamophobic. Of course it's right to charge him and prosecute him and convict him and send him to prison, which did happen for so many people. But little Johnny's not the one to really blame. It's the people in positions of authority, the politicians, the think tanks, the media moguls, who spend their time feeding the public discourse, poisoning it to a point where then we see what happened on our streets. And if you look at what is happening now with Twitter and Elon Musk and his support for people like Tommy Robinson, these are really dangerous men who are putting out really dangerous messages, and it's going to have a real life impact, not just on British Muslims, but the state of our nation.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much for this, Baroness. I've got an extra couple of questions here. However, we want to actually make sure that we actually get across to the room as well for people who've got questions within the room. So I'll ask one more question, and then as soon as I'm finished with that question, and then we'll get people, because no one stuck their hand up straight away, right? So I'll ask one more question, and then after that, if anybody's got any questions, then feel free to also ask, and we'll have a mic going around. So Scotland has broke the glass ceiling multiple times in politics for Muslims in the UK. It's a point of pride as a Scottish Muslim that the first ever Muslim elected in the UK was a councillor named Bashir Mann in 1970 for the Kingston ward in Glasgow. The first Muslim member of the Westminster Parliament in the UK was Muhammad Sarwar, elected in 1997 in Glasgow. The first Muslim leader of a UK political party was in 2021, his son Anas Sarwar. The first Muslim of a Western democracy in 2023 was elected in Scotland as well, for Hamza Yusuf. And this is first time for everywhere across the entire UK, when we've got places like Birmingham and Leicester and Luton and London and Bradford. So you were Britain's first Muslim cabinet minister in the UK government and the first Asian person to chair a major political party. So my question to you is this: do you think you actually might be Scottish? No, seriously, I suppose what lessons can be taken from your book? As somebody who was elected as a politician at 20 years old, I wanted to ask a specific political question, which is, what lessons can be taken from your book, Muslims Don't Matter, to those Muslims in the room looking to become involved in politics and political parties? What guidance would you give to them?
Yeah, I'm definitely not Scottish. The Yorkshire clan are loud and proud, and I'm definitely Yorkshire. I would say a couple of things. Look, first of all, why am I in politics? I ask myself this question all the time. Politics is a lonely, godforsaken place. It is not a pleasant place. Most people hate you. You have no quality of life. It isn't particularly rewarding. and it can be a really corrosive place. So why am I in politics? I'm in politics because I hope my kids don't have to be. It's not the kind of world I would want my children to inhabit. Now, having said that, why am I going to persuade you to be a part of it? Because you shouldn't want to be in politics. Politics should come and find you. Something should burn so deeply in the pit of your stomach that it keeps you awake. And you feel the only way to change is to be involved in the political space to try and effect that change. And so if you're thinking about being in politics, have that level of commitment to something, because that is what will sustain you. That's how resilient you're going to have to be. But before you go into politics, there's a couple of things that I would ask you to do. Go away and get a proper job, right? I mean, you know, it's great when young people like you are in politics, but I just think that you've got to go away and experience the real world and I think it's important to go into politics having had an established career. So having had a successful legal and business career before I went into politics really mattered. It also matters because I think it's really important to keep your financial life and your political life separate. And one of the reasons why I think I have been so front-footed in politics is because politics didn't pay my mortgage. And I think going into politics financially independent is a really powerful place to be, because you then stay in politics for the right reasons and for principles, and you don't compromise those principles. And so again, I would say to you, go away, get a career, sort your life out, buy your house, find a partner, because politics is a crazy, heady world, and having the right person by your side who tells you not to believe your own hype and keeps you grounded and gives you a real life around this crazy world that you live is really important. So I say to a lot of young people, go away and kind of try and tick as many of these other boxes as you can before you go into politics. But do go into politics if you feel that you are strong and resilient enough to make change, because it is an incredibly privileged platform that allows you to do what you do. As a lawyer, I campaigned. In charity, I campaigned. As a racial justice campaigner, I campaigned. But actually being able to stand on the floor of the House of Commons or the House of Lords, and speak there, or sit around the cabinet table and speak there, carries its own privilege, quite literally, because you can stand up and say what you want in the House and it's privileged. But it also gives you a platform to be able to have your voice heard to a much bigger audience. But I want to end it on this, and I do want you to remember this, that people think that politics is all about position. You can actually have position without power, and you can have power without position. People used to say to me, do you miss cabinet? You know, at one point I was one of 20 odd people who sat around the table and were effectively running the country, right? The top team. That was position. And yes, it was wonderful and it was a great privilege, and there's amazing things that I'm incredibly proud of having achieved. But in many ways, I feel now, outside of that position, I feel far more powerful. I feel far more able to exercise that power in a different way. So don't allow yourself, when you go into politics, to allow position to suffocate you to a point where you fail to understand the power that you have, and therefore you fail to use it.
Oh, it's a fantastic answer, and this was just a reflection for myself. When I was to restand as a councillor, I decided not to, because I'd heard this speech referring to everybody, every single individual should be seeking to either rise or raise. So either get to the top of their field or should be working within their communities to raise raise those around them to connect with those communities. And I suppose that's where the vision of the Scottish Asian Business Chamber came from. We feel as if that our communities are doing a fantastic amount of work, but I wanted to bridge the gap between those of influence and those who don't have access to that influence. And I wanted to spend that time to figure out a way, to mechanism to do it. So alhamdulillah, I've been blessed to be able to lead with this organisation with Umar for the past year, and we're hopeful that we can do a lot more in Scotland to take the entire community with us, and then to connect with individuals like yourself as well. So, question time. Nobody seemed that keen before. That is...
Now there's a lot of hands.
Yeah, now there's a lot of hands. How does one choose forward, back?
Well, we'll start with a woman.
All right, because I didn't see a single woman's hands up.
Are there any women in the hall with their hands up? Because I think there are.
Okay.
There you go.
Cool. Is there a woman with a question? Or I suppose I'll go here.
There's a lady there with a brown jacket, I think.
Go. I'll grab Gillian then.
Hi there. I'm curious, when you have your podcast with David Baddiel and you have the conversations about the Arab-Israeli conflict, I mean, you mentioned Sacha Baron Cohen and some of the view, the way he portrays Muslims, and I think Sacha Baron Cohen might argue that's not what he's trying to do. He's trying to be, I don't know, he's trying to show something different. Do you have those discussions with, I mean, what does David Baddiel say? I mean, you're sitting there, you're both having this discussion. What does he say about the images in the media about the Muslims? You're right. We're portrayed as a ragheads, we're portrayed as a terrorist organization, and that stems from the 9/11 situation. And so I don't think the situation is just from last year. This has been going, this is like a drip effect since 9/11, Afghanistan war, Iraq war. This has been going on. I've heard from 9/11 a lot of women having to remove their headscarves. A lot of women felt really threatened in the streets. This is a drip effect that's happened for so long. And I know you're saying you're now at a stage where you're done. Could you have spoken out earlier? Why now?
Okay. So many questions in that. So first of all, you've got to listen to the podcast because we have a whole conversation because David is good friends with Sacha. And so it was quite an interesting, squeaky conversation that we had around that. I mean, look, there's no doubt, and I explore it in here, how, you make one program, Borat, and you might say, okay, it's comedy. You make another one, you put a poster out where you're lying there naked, but with a ring saying Allah on your hand as your main poster, and then you make The Dictator, where you're effectively displaying all of those characteristics. Once maybe comedy, twice, maybe third time, you kind of think this is a pattern of behavior, which is deliberately demonizing and stigmatizing Muslim communities. So I have no doubt about what was being done. And what's really interesting is that the writer on one of those programs is a chap called Lee Cairns. And if you listen to some of the appalling things that Lee has been saying during the recent onslaught in Gaza, I think there's no doubt about the kind of background to where this was coming from. Speaking out earlier, I mean, I've been writing about this stuff for nearly 20 years. If you go back through some of the things, I mean, what was fascinating was that when I was in cabinet, there were constant leaks about the rows I was having inside government. And I think for me, when I wrote my first book in 2017, The Enemy Within, some of these issues were explored. I think what this book is, and why I think it's different, is that the urgency of saying we have to change course. We have to change course. We're at a crossroads now, and if we don't pivot now, we are going to end up at the point of no return. And I think that's probably why this book is different. And I also think there's definitely something about post-50, and particularly for women post-50. I think you write, you think, you explore in very different ways. So I think I am, if I could have been, I think I am much more bold than I have ever been, bolder than I've ever been in this writing. And I think for the first time, as I say in the book, I start by acknowledging my privilege. I think suddenly realizing that at this point I have a choice. I can either say, well, life's been good and now we better go off into the distance and retire on a nice beach somewhere, or to say, life's been good and therefore I have a responsibility to do something about it for other people. So I think that moment was another realization that, you know, I can either walk away from this or I can walk into it. And walking into it is painful, but it was the right thing to do.
I'm going to instigate a rule that basically if I've named your organization before, or I'm about to name your organization in this question, then you can't ask a question, because I saw most of those hands were from the conversations from the organization. So I'm going to ask this question, then go to another question. There is a multitude of organizations in the room today, including Cull for Heritage, who are an organization preserving South Asian and Muslim heritage, specifically in Scotland. They're presently fundraising to build Scotland's first national memorial to the British Indian Army to commemorate and educate about the sacrifice of 4 million Muslim and multi-faith soldiers, a legacy from our shared history that I know is close to your own heart. We also have the Scottish Association of Minority Ethnic Educators here, I believe, Boots and Beards, the Well Foundation, Al Mizan, Interfaith Scotland, Amina Women's Resource Centre, the Scottish Refugee Council, and a multitude of other organisations here. So I suppose, what key takeaway would you give to these organisations, and indeed ourselves at the Scottish Asian Business Chamber and the Zen Women's Empowerment Team, to take away from your book, Muslims Don't Matter?
Read the book. It's probably the start. I just want you to go away from today, first of all, realizing that Britain and the overwhelming majority of people in Britain are decent, tolerant people, inclusive people who reject violence. The book is dedicated to two groups of people. One, the ordinary decent people of this nation who reject violence, hatred and division. And second, to the stigmatized, stereotyped and silenced. I hope this gives you a voice. So one, I'd like you to walk out of this room recognizing the everyday decent people and talk to people around you who are not Muslim or who may not understand what Muslim communities are going through, and open up those conversations. Be brave enough to create the space to have the difficult conversations. That's the first thing I would say to you. And the second thing I would say to you is, I hope this book gives you, if you're British Muslim, I hope this book gives you a voice. I have heard from person after person after person over the last 12 months how in their schools, in their hospitals, in their places of work, they feel they can't say certain things, they feel silenced. And I can understand how that feels and how difficult that feels. And I've spoken to parents of kids who've had the most appalling experiences within schools. And I know it must feel hard. So if you feel you can't say what you need to say, then quote from the book. Use the book as a way of saying, look, I'd like to have a conversation because Baroness Warsi said on page whatever, 60 whatever, this is what she thinks. What do you think? You can't be held to account for my words. I can be held to account for my words. And I am more than happy to be held to account for every single word in this book. So if you feel silenced, let this be your voice.
Thank you. Just a quick question. You're from Yorkshire, is that right? Somewhere there. Now, coming from a Yorkshire background, and obviously your father said work in the mills, and that's a very strong Labour sort of part of England. Why did you join the Tories?
Wow, party politics. I mean, look, there's a whole series of reasons as to why I'm a centre-right politician. I believe in a low-tax economy. I believe in a small state. I believe in a larger society. I always say, and this is very controversial, but I always say, you know, Islam is a very centre-right religion. I mean, we have a 2.5% rate of tax. I don't know if anybody knows any other country in the world or ideology or religion or grouping that believes in 2.5% tax. And then it incentivizes you, by the way, in a whole series of other ways, from sadqa, lillah, qarz hasna, a million other ways in which you can give. But actually your rate of tax is 2.5%. I believe in family. I believe in accountability, personal accountability. I believe in individual liberty. I believe in the state getting out of your way and letting you live your life in the way that you want, not interfering in your personal life. All of these are centre-right values. Now, being a centre-right politician and being a conservative today are two completely different things, because part of the problem I have with today's Conservative Party is that it is not a Conservative Party, much like today's Republican Party is not a Republican Party. So what makes me a centre-right politician are all of those things. I'm not entirely comfortable, as has often been in the public domain, with the way in which the Conservative Party has conducted itself in recent years.
We're going to go for another woman. If there's not another. Look at his mates.
Thank you very much, Baroness Warsi. Very interesting journey in your life, which you sort of charted out and brought on. We're really very proud of you, firstly. My question was, in terms of your family, what sort of support or encouragement or led you to become a politician? And what are your future plans in your life? Thank you.
The second part of the question?
What's your future plans?
What are your future plans? I was supposed to be retiring this year. I am incredibly lucky. I have the most wonderful family. My dad has always been my biggest champion, and he's not scared of anything except for my mom. And my mom was not in favour of me going into politics. She consistently said to me that her two things were: nothing good ever comes of those who go into politics. They go in with their respect and dignity, and they leave having lost both. She also used to say, we're not from a political family. She's obviously born and raised in Pakistan. I can't understand why you want to be in this. This is not our kind of thing. And also, I had an incredibly successful legal practice. She couldn't understand why I needed to be able to give up a very successful legal practice to work in, to spend time in politics. And my dad, like a lot of fathers, would stand there and say, aapki ammi sahi baat kar rahi hain. And then afterwards he'd say, you don't need to listen to what she said. You go do what you need to do. So your mom's telling you all the right things, but I think Dad has a huge sense of purpose, that there is something bigger than all of us, and that playing your part is important. So he's always been my biggest champion, and alhamdulillah, I'm incredibly lucky that I have both my parents still with us. He's now still fighting fit in his 80s. I also think that, and I think this is such an important thing. What you see is the front room. What you don't see is the back room. And so often we don't realise what stands behind what we see as public leadership. I have the most wonderful husband. He is a completely private figure. He doesn't do speeches. He doesn't appear in photographs. But what he does do is he drives me from A to B. He makes sure that there is always water in the car. He makes sure that I have coffee at various intervals. He makes sure that I've packed all the right things when we leave. He makes sure that my iPad is charged and my phone. And he made sure when the kids were young, and now they've all grown up and moved out, he made sure that the kids weren't taken into social services. He made sure that things worked at home. And he kept so much of what happens at home with kids and family and everything else away from me, to allow me to focus on the things that I needed to focus. When you are fighting the battles that we fight often in politics, you don't have the energy or the headspace to do anything else. And where I've been incredibly lucky is that he and the children have consistently allowed me to focus simply on that. And that means that they made the sacrifices all the time in the background. And it does take a whole of family effort to do that. You know, it takes my father-in-law and mother-in-law not holding me to account or allowing anybody else to hold me to account for not turning up at events. It requires, you know, missing birthdays, missing parents' evenings, missing a whole load of aspects of your kids' lives. And I would say this today, that if you have people in your family who are in positions of leadership, they're not out there having a great time. They're not out there living the life in London. They're not out there at all hours being difficult. They're out there doing the toughest of jobs, and you have to find a way to support them, not in the way that suits you, but in the way that suits them. So ask that person in your life, how can I make this easier? And sometimes it's as simple as it was, you know, a few weeks ago, leaving for London on a Monday, breaking my hairdryer on the way out because it wasn't working and I yanked it and I broke it, and turning up a week later and he'd bought me a new hairdryer and plugged it in, right? It's those little things, right? It's those little things that make a huge difference in the way in which you're then allowed to free up your mind and head to be able to fight the battles that need fighting. And so, you know, whoever is in your life, you know, if there's another takeaway from today, go away and ask that person in your life, maybe I don't understand, but you tell me what I can do from this tiny thing to the big thing to make your life easier to do what you're doing, because what you're doing, I can't do, but I can at least support you in doing it.
I've been married for 3 years now too, so I had to applaud the efforts of your husband there. I think we're going to actually have to wrap up from now, because we want to make sure you get the book signings, everyone, to get through there as well. Just before we wrap up, I actually got you a gift as well. I have this thing where I have like a book collection where I go around and actually get people to sign books and things like that. So I've got like a Boris Johnson book. I've got I had a manifesto from the Scottish Independence 2014 from Alex Salmond and a multitude of others. I had the privilege of meeting with Councillor Bashir Mann, the first ever elected Muslim politician in the UK for any political office. And he wrote a book called The Crescent and the Thistle. I don't think they actually make the book anymore, and unfortunately Bashir Mann passed away a few years ago, but it's actually over there next to you. If you want to, it's a signed book from Councillor Bashir Mann.
You sure you want to give this away?
No, I think what I want to reflect on is Councillor Bashir Mann got elected in 1970, and that was 54 years ago.
The year before I was born.
Yeah, and it's on his shoulders that you were able to stand and be the first cabinet minister in the UK government. And I think now, as somebody like myself who's involved in politics as a young person, that I'm really glad to have been able to meet with you, to have hosted you here today. And I hope that for many people in the room here today who are hoping to get involved in politics, that we may stand on your shoulders. So it's an incredible privilege to be able to give you that book, and then for me to receive a book from yourself. So with love from Scotland, and thank you so much for coming up here and doing this event with us. I just want to say to everybody here that a similar event to this was hosted with Baroness Warsi a few weeks ago, and it was about £65 a head and things like that to come to the event and things like that. So I fully expect Matt, wherever he is, I know it didn't matter to you whether or not people sold the book or not. Is he still here? Sorry, you're behind a pillar there, Matt. It may not matter to you if the books are getting sold, but it certainly matters to Matt if the books are getting sold. And the fact that you were able to do this event with us on such short notice, it was only 2 weeks we pulled this around. So I fully expect everybody to be leaving with a book here today, if you're able to afford it. And I just want to say if you can give Baroness Warsi a round of applause for having given her time.